Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Following our programming contains factual information about the reality of the universe as it is currently understood by science. While being factual, proof-based, and rigorously tested the scientific way, nothing delights the scientific-minded more than discovering that a fundamental understanding of how things work to be fundamentally flawed. Getting the unexpected result from an experiment is no failure, for the predictive powers on the part of the researcher are not generated to a result, but a great opportunity to investigate the unknown. For as satisfying as knowing a thing may be, investigating the unknown is much more interesting. But where do we look to find the new unknowns we currently don't know we aren't knowing? Simply by listening to This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good Thursday on TWiT, Kiki.
Good Thursday, Justin. What's happening? We got a show to do.
Yeah.
We got a show. There's science. There's been things happening. I've been reading about things all week long, and now we get to talk about them. I'm excited.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. So welcome, everyone. This is This Week in Science. This is yet another episode to bring you lots of science news and chitter chat about that science news. We have a good show ahead today. I brought stories about birds and magnets, plants and intelligence, and black holes. What you got?
Let's see. What do I have? I have gravity-defying mice who can see without their eyes.
Ooh.
Sort of, and microbials that can control the weather of a planet.
This all sounds very science fiction.
It's all kind of a mishmash of the stories I've got.
Interesting. Very interesting. Allie, what'd you bring?
I have how practice makes perfect, but only if you're smart about it. And lying eyes. Eyes that lie.
You've got some lying eyes. That's probably a song somewhere.
It is a song. Are you kidding me? It's a song that was stuck in the tape deck of like a 6-day VW bus for an entire summer and drove me absolutely insane. And I can't hear a single riff of that Eagles album without just cringing and going into flashbacks.
I'm gonna make sure and like find a way to like hide a recorder under your bed and have playback for you again. Flashbacks. Awesome. So we'll try and make use of that during Allie's story. I like it. But in the meantime, Justin, do we live in a black hole?
No, I don't think so. Do we?
Well, there's a researcher who thinks we might live in a black hole in another universe. Yeah, my mind is totally blown by this story, and it's honestly the way it all comes out. It's like a science fiction novel. I mean, this is getting to the point in physics where it's like, really, your theory is moving into.
Well, you know, it actually
fiction.
makes a lot of sense. It actually makes an incredible amount of sense.
Yeah. So let me get
without even hearing the story yet. But that actually makes that's probably the most logical explanation of the multi-universe ever, is that we are stuck in a black hole in the bigger universe. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So this study was published in archive.org, which, you know, as a disclaimer, means that it hasn't been peer reviewed. This is just an idea. This is a first writing of a paper, getting it out there, and it will be reviewed and probably more highly or finely tuned as we move forward. So we'll probably hear more about this eventually. But Nikodem Poplavsky of Indiana University is he started thinking about the whole problem with properties of subatomic particles. It just doesn't things are not really working with inflation and everything with the theory of relativity and observation of the ancient universe and what's going on. And he's the way things work, the properties of subatomic particles, you can't consign them entirely to quantum mechanics. And so things just don't quite match up. And so he's like, hey, I have an answer to this. And in his paper, he says that general relativity theory ignores the intrinsic momentum of subatomic particles like protons and neutrons. But there is a modified version of general relativity known as the Einstein-Cartan-Kibble-Sayama theory of gravity that solves this problem. And so these particles interact repulsively, creating tiny amounts of a force called torsion. And so normally this doesn't really do anything, but this torsion can actually have significant effects in certain situations, like if density is increased a lot, like in the singularity of a black hole. So what he has proposed is that where we think there is a singularity, this huge, dense, mass-filled area that's tightly packed into the center of a black hole, where we just thought it was a singularity, that is actually an entire universe in there, and that it is the forces that start taking place to build up matter and stretch time past the event horizon actually go into creating and incubating new universes. Yeah. So there are all these different things that kind of spin off of it. That the properties in one universe could actually kind of end up trickling into another universe, and so one universe could inherit the properties of the universe in which its black hole resides, and so inherit some similarities to that mother or grandmother universe. Additionally, it might also affect the arrow of time, and that we actually probably have time because of our mother universe and how it worked on the other side of a black hole. Anyway, there are all these crazy spin-off ideas that come from this, but really it all just it comes from this guy taking a look at general relativity theory and going, this doesn't make sense. Let's see if we have another way to explain this. And what would explain this? The density of a black hole. That would change everything around, and suddenly you would have a universe. It would create the conditions in which a Big Bang could take place.
And technically, we have space for entire other universes and every definable volume of space in this universe.
Yeah,
it's the
tons of
whole
space.
Principle of Hilbert space is that there's infinite amounts of space. Just as there's an infinite number of numbers between the numbers 1 and 2, or 0 and 1, or any, you can go on infinitely. And the space supposedly works the same way. There's enough ways to break it down that the entire universe in a black hole, no problem.
Yeah,
it also kind of makes sense. One of the big principles of the Big Bang that have always bothered me is that the Big Bang happens, and that created space, that created time.
Right.
And outside of our universe, there could just as well be more universes, and they could be trickling in. The whole expansion of our universe might be an expansion or into that other universe, into the larger multiverse. We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how it would resolve itself, but I know there's another theory that, like, on the other side of black holes. So a black hole is a hole in space-time. Where does it go? What does it do? What's it involved in? That there's like a mirror hole on the other side of a black hole, like into another dimension, that's called a white hole, which actually, instead of accreting matter, actually like spits it out and creates more matter.
Which is what we would be. See, that's the whole thing. That's what our universe would be, one of those white black holes where we're the other side that's exploding into, as opposed to seeming to be condensing from.
Right. Yeah.
And
Mind
it has this
bending.
real bubbly feel to it, but
So does this?
we thought our solar system was a bubble. Well, we thought our planet was a bubble
Right.
with some lights that were hung. Then we were like, oh, there's a whole galaxy, and that was the universe. This one,
But does
or the
this
solar
change?
system.
Does this change anything about who's going to win, like the Tour de France or the World Cup or the presidential elections? Like,
No, it won't affect anything that's
right?
inconsequential and unimportant.
yeah.
All those details of detritus that take place on the surface of this, populated this rock populated with organisms, not really going to affect a lot.
Nah. Not at all. All right, Justin, what did you bring?
I have this is sent in from Minion Trina. This is a scientist takes on gravity from the July 12th, 2010 edition of the New York Times by Dennis Overby, as recombobulated by me right now. We've known for a long time gravity doesn't exist. It's time to yell it. So says Eric Verlinde, string theorist, professor of physics at the University of Amsterdam, contending that gravity is an illusion.
I love him. I think I have a crush on Eric Verlinde. I think I do.
Is he so brilliant?
Yes.
Yeah?
This is an awesome idea.
Even though he came up with this idea last summer, and
Yeah, but he
I've had
wrote
this idea for over 5 years. I've been explaining this.
He wrote it up like what, in February? I think that was the first time we talked about it on the show.
Yeah, he came up with the idea in this last summer. He wrote it up in February of this year. I've been talking about this for 5 years.
Yeah, whatever.
What oh.
I love poking at you, Justin. Sorry. It's too
I remember
easy.
the first time I explained to Kirsten my oceanic string space hypothesis thing that made it so that we didn't need gravity. And at first she thought I was quoting something real, and then when I told her it was my idea, she was like, oh. I'm starting to believe you.
Yeah.
So this is a great article, though. You should go look up this full article, July 12th, New York Times, by Dennis Overby, talking about Verlinde's idea. I'm going to do some more paraphrasing from it, though. Reversing the logic of 300 years of science, he argued in a recent paper titled On the Origin of Gravity and the Laws of Newton. Gravity is a consequence of the venerable laws of thermodynamics, which describe the behavior of heat and gases. For me, gravity doesn't exist, said Dr. Verlinde, who is among a growing number of physicists and armchair physicists who say the science has been looking at gravity the wrong way, and that something is there that is more basic, from which gravity emerges. From the collective behavior, it emerges from the mechanics of atoms, the like. So basically, that gravity is a byproduct of things taking place of the natural condition of quantum mechanics, how things in the very, very smallest levels of our reality are operating actually create the effect that looks like gravity without there being a force. No graviton. This means no
graviton.
We no longer need gravitons. And we no longer need bosons.
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be an indication? Which means the Large Hadron Collider is not going to find the God particle.
Well, maybe we could find bosons or all of the many particles that make up what they think might be the boson.
No, you won't need a boson because the whole idea of mass, a particle that creates mass, is so that it can explain gravity. If you explain gravity in a different way, you no longer need a boson to factor in anywhere.
Right.
So anyways, there's a very poor analogy in this article. It may be Verlinde's or it may just be the author of the study. I'm not sure. goes something like this. If you're about to flash the world. Yeah. My boy just got out of the shower and he was about to jump in front of the camera. Stare at dudes. So here's the analogy. It goes something like this. Your hair fizzles in the heat and humidity because there are more ways for your hair to be curled than straight. Nature likes the options, and it would take force to pull the hair straight. It would eliminate nature's options. So the force we call gravity is simply a byproduct of nature's propensity to give you a bad hair day. It's kind of a bad analogy. If you read my book, Omi, there's a fantastic analogy for this sort of for how statistics on this small level can turn into something that looks really smooth on our level, but can still have plenty of entropy in it. I love these. I love this is Andrew Strominger, a string theorist at Harvard, and I love this quote on the subject. He says, "Some people have said it can't be right. Others that it's right and we already knew it. That it's right and profound or right and trivial. Either way." What you do have to say is that it has inspired a lot of interesting discussions. It's a very interesting collection of ideas that has touched on things that we most profoundly do not understand about our universe. And this is another great quote from Verlind. "If I am proven wrong, something has been learned anyway. Ignoring it would have been the worst thing," which I think is brilliant and bold, that you have the good idea, you have the good theory, or you have the good the perspective on something, or even if it's not good, you should put it forward if you believe in it. When this idea came to me, I was really excited and euphoric even. It's not often you get a chance to say something new about Newton's laws, and I don't see immediately that I'm wrong, so that's good enough to go ahead for me.
That's good logic. I don't see that I'm
I don't see that I'm
wrong.
wrong.
So, hey, let's keep
I'm
going.
gonna go forward.
That's good.
So this is going to be a fantastic topic for some time to come. His getting these papers out in rapid session, doing talks and things, but it's not at the point where it's going to get a lot of traction. There needs to be some more heads wrapped around it for a while to get the traction on it. But
I'm sure there are already.
I love the idea of gravity going down at last. It's
Well,
such a primitive concept.
What we call gravity, what holds us to the planet, and that's not going to go away. But the idea of gravity as its own force, that will go away. It's just the understanding that it's a side effect, or it's like you always say, the shadow on the cave wall. It's something that we as human beings we perceive, but we perceive a lot of things that aren't necessarily real.
Right.
Or true. So, yeah. I think
the thing is, I think it does change more than that, though. I think it's going to change everything about dark matter. I think that's going to be the thing that really illuminates, because we're still trying to conceive of dark matter as an anti-gravity or having these gravitational effects that aren't explainable. I think the problem isn't. I think the problem is that we've seen gravity the wrong way. We're expecting to be a gravity as a force that is derived from matter, specifically in proportion to the amount of matter that's there.
Right.
I think once that gets changed, then the motion of the galaxies will make more sense.
Yeah. I think it'll be important. These are the important questions to ask the physicists to tell us how they think it's going to turn out. So, these are all
I'm not
jumping
waiting for
to
them.
assumptions.
You know how long they take? It could be decades. Could be years.
Could be years.
Could be a couple decades. I might not be around by the time they figure it out.
Well, if we wait too long, Allie's not going to be around anymore to give us her news. So, Allie, tell us what you brought. See, Allie's not even here anymore.
In some conditions, only if you practice in the right way. It's a story. It's a study that shows that variable practice is a lot more effective than just practicing one thing over and over again. I guess cognitive neuroscientists at USC and UCLA have described the neural basis for this. I guess studies before have shown this, and so now they're describing the neural basis for it. They did a study where they split 59 volunteers into 6 groups, and 3 groups were assigned to practice a arm movement that was challenging, and the other 3 groups had to practice the movement and related tasks, which varied. So it varied it up. And the volunteers in the variable practice group showed better retention of the skill, and the process of consolidating it in the brain was better, basically. And so the group that showed consistent practice of the arm movement, then they retained it to a lesser degree. And one of the researchers says, in the variable practice structure condition, you're basically solving the motor practice anew each time. If I'm just repeating the same thing over and over again, as in the constant practice condition, I don't have to process it very deeply. We gravitate towards a simple rote practice structure because we're basically lazy and we don't want to work hard. But it turns out that memory is enhanced when we engage in practice that is more challenging and requires us to reconstruct the activity, he says. So, yeah, it's that we have to relearn it each time that we do it because we're changing it up each time. And then they did a magnetic stimulation of the prefrontal cortex to pinpoint the neural circuits involved. And the volunteers in the variable practice group, the ones that varied it up, those who received the magnetic stimulation failed to retain or consolidate the arm movement, as well as those in the same group who did not receive magnetic stimulation. So this implied that the prefrontal cortex was necessary for consolidating the memory. So they did this to pinpoint exactly where it was that this consolidation happened.
Yeah, so they basically used the magnetic stimulation to mess up their ability.
Yeah, to kind of erase or mess up the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they also said, while it may be harder during practice to switch between tasks, you end up remembering the tasks better later than you do if you engage in this drill-like practice. In motor skills training, they know this. In educational programs where they're teaching kids in cursive handwriting, they know this, he says. So I guess that the way that we learn, it's important for understanding the way that we learn. So, and the magnetic interference tests help define the exact time that it took to consolidate the skills. For example, the volunteers that chose to receive the interference 4 hours later, so that chose to mess up what would be their consolidation, 4 hours later had no effect. So basically it showed that the brain had already done the consolidation. So it's kind of interesting as far as ways of learning, or constructing methods for ways of learning.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that it had to be a more, I guess, variable. The way they say is variable, but more complicated series of actions or movements.
Or I guess different, it's changing between different tasks, learning different tasks at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder how that, because there's a nervous, in your nerves, there's a phenomenon called habituation. And habituation occurs after the same thing happens over and over and over again. Eventually the nerve gets tired of it and just is like, I don't need to respond to this anymore. I know what it is. This is not interesting to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That could be a part of it. And that's what they're saying too, is it just they're lazy, so they don't need to keep responding in the same way. So by varying it, it's harder, at first, but it keeps your brain working essentially. So something like that.
So does that mean everything I learned from the Karate Kid is wrong?
Not everything. You wax on, wax off, and then then other things that were taught.
don't keep waxing on or
exactly.
Switch between them. Yeah.
Switch.
I like the new Karate Kid. He has to put the jacket on the hook and take it down over and over and over again. Although, am I the only one that's bothered by the fact that the new Karate Kid is called the Karate Kid?
I refuse to see it because it's called the Karate Kid.
Oh, it's an awesome movie. I love the movie. But he's learning Kung Fu. I mean, there's one's in China.
Wasn't that the original one too?
No, the other one was karate at Miyagi. It was Japanese martial arts. It was karate. Now he's in China learning kung fu.
Kung
But he's
fu.
called the Karate Kid. I love the movie. Don't get me wrong, but he should have been called they should have been bold enough to call it the Kung Fu Kid. Is that
No boldness there. No
Nobody
boldness to
cares.
go. All right. So the moral of Ali's story, I think, is that
Maggio is not in it.
we need to be less lazy and go for the challenges. Go for the challenges, mix it up, make it hard, and it'll get easier eventually, and it'll be worth the challenge.
Exactly.
Did I get it?
Exactly.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to This Week in Science, and I have a story that was sent in by Marshall Davis in Jacksonville, Florida, all about birds. So we know that birds have this ability to migrate and be able to direct themselves based on the magnetic fields of the earth. And people have been studying this for years, trying to figure out, how do birds do it? How are they actually able to use magnetic information? And we've learned that there are actually magnetic particles that little ions, little like iron atoms, not exactly, but there are little molecules that respond to the magnetic field by changing their conformation inside the head of the bird, and it overlays a glow or a field actually that the birds can see on the horizon. And it's still trying to figure out exactly how it all works. And so some researchers at Goethe, how do you say Goethe Universität in Frankfurt, Germany, studied the vision of the European robin to figure out a little bit more about it. They ended up putting goggles on the robin's eyes, and some of the goggles were covered with a clear foil and others were covered with a frosted foil. And some birds had it so it was clear foil on one side and frosted foil on the other side. The sides of the goggles were equally translucent and allowed about 70% of the light to get through. But on the frosted side, of course, it was frosty, and so the image was blurry and less clear and difficult for the birds to make out what was going on. So some of the birds were able to see crystal clear through, say, their left eye and not so well through their right eye, or crystal clear through their right eye and not so well through their left eye. Then they took the birds they released them into a funnel-shaped cage with its walls painted with correction fluid, which was scratched if the birds touched them. And so they found that birds with no eye coverings and birds with their left eye covered set off towards the north, as would be expected. You'd expect the birds to want to migrate to the north in the spring season for the breeding. The birds with their right eye covered, however, with the frosty lens, they got all confused and they flew around the room bumping into things because they couldn't tell what was going on. So what the researchers found is that it's not just this magnetic sense that's just all pervasive, but it actually is linked to what the birds see in the visual field. So the horizon and the images, the night sky, the things around them, the sun, etc. Any visual cue that they see, if it's clear or not, makes a really big difference. And so the birds are not able to actually separate their visual and magnetic cues. So they don't seem separate to the birds. They're actually like a very tightly linked system. Kind of neat. It's kind of neat. I like these stories about how birds see. I mean, this is just an amazing extra sense. You know, the idea that there are little tiny magnetic particles in birds' heads that allow them to see the magnetic field, like a glow on the horizon. Oh, that way's north. I mean, wouldn't that be convenient?
Well, maybe.
Huh.
But pop quiz, Kirsten.
What?
What part of the eye allows us to see?
That would be your brain.
So good. So good. Anyway, it was going to be a trick story here. But is there anything else in the eye that is necessary?
Anything else?
Yeah.
Like all of it?
Like
like the rods and the cones and the optic nerve and...
Yes, the human retina contains about 120 million rods, which detect light, darkness, shape, and movement, and about 7 million cones, which is how we get the color in there. Without them, our eyesight simply would not exist. But that might not be true. According to a study published July 15th in the journal Neuron, provides new hope to people who have the severe vision impairments who are blind. A team led by biologist Samer Hatter, the Johns Hopkins University Krieger School of Arts and Sciences, found that mice that didn't have any rods or cones, no functioning rods or cones, could still see. And not just light, but also patterns and images. This was courtesy of a special photosensitive cell, or a group of photosensitive cells in the rodent's retina. Until now, it had been presumed that those cells, called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, didn't play a role in image formation, but instead served other functions, such as dictating when the animals went to sleep or woke up.
Right. That's right. They thought that there were these specific cells in the eye that were linked to the way that light is sensed and leads to the diurnal system. So release of melatonin and sleepiness and wakefulness and all that kind of stuff. But it's actually linked
that set that wound our internal clock.
Yeah, that's linked to our intrachiasmatic nucleus. I think that's what it is. That sets the clock. Yeah.
So yeah, up until now, it was assumed the rods and cones were the only cells capable of detecting light and allowing us to form images. But they're thinking now, this might not just be part of the circadian rhythms, but even mice that were blind could form these could see measurable images. Wow. So
Wait,
then
even mice that were blind. What does that mean? Even mice that didn't have rods and cones, you mean?
Yeah.
That if they have these other cells.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're not blind.
That's right.
They were supposed to be blind. That was the thing.
Okay.
By all of our assumptions, or all of what we knew, all the facts of science behind it, said that these would be, at least in this study, blind mice. And yet they concluded that they are in fact not blind mice after all, because we eliminated the basic stuff that we thought would produce sight, and they still had levels of vision. Yeah, to conduct the study, the team used a special system to genetically label cells and then trace them to the rodent's brains before subjecting the mice to a number of vision tests. In one, mice followed the movements of a rotating drum, a test that assessed the animal's ability to track moving objects. Another, the rodents were placed with a Y-shaped maze and challenged to escape by selecting the lever that would let them out. Lever was associated with a certain visual pattern. Interesting. The mice that were blind, meaning they lacked rods and cones, couldn't find the lever, but only those with the ganglion cells could.
Nice. Well, we have to go to a break right now. If you are listening in, I hope that you will stay tuned. We have a lot more science for you and a Minion Mailbag coming up in the second half. We'll be back with This Week in Science. Just a few.
Shows the way to go.
back. This is This Week in Science, and we have lots more science for you. I just want to know if everyone has taken a quiz. There's a quiz out there I took recently. I found out that I am, I don't know, like 65% nerd and 30% dork and 45% geek. I was pretty excited about that. And these aren't supposed to be additive percentages. These are, where you fall on a scale. So like your nerd, dork, geek proficiency scale. If anybody out there, I tweeted the link on Twitter this afternoon, and so take the little test. Let me know where you fall. I love to find out where people fall in a very non-scientific survey. It's great. All right, everybody. Let's see. I have a story about. This is from Gordon McLeod. Thank you for sending in this story about plants and their intelligence. Now, on the show, we talk a lot about how amazing plants are. And, maybe one day it'll be true, vegetarians won't have anything to eat of plants either if we, take things to the nth degree. But according to the study, which is in the BBC from this last week, plants are able to learn and remember information about light, which is crazy. Just so, and the researchers go so far as to say that the system that is in place is smart enough to actually be considered a form of intelligence. So they have electrochemical signals that are carried by cells in the plants, and they transmit information about light intensity and the quality of the light that is reaching a plant from each of the leaves. And it's very similar, the researchers say, to our own nervous systems. So the researchers say, we shone the light only on the bottom of the plant, and we observed changes in the upper part. And this is Professor Stanislaw Karpinski from the Warsaw University of Life Sciences in Poland. He led the study, and this was presented at the Society for Experimental Biology's meeting in Prague in the Czech Republic. And the changes proceeded when the light was off. This was a complete surprise. So the light being off, it's like an energy system storing information and then continuing to act on it. Somehow the plants were still able to respond to the light that they had received earlier. There were characteristic changes for red, blue, and white light, the researcher explained. When we shone the light on the plant for 1 hour and then infected it with a virus or with bacteria 24 hours after the light exposure, it resisted the infection. But when we infected the plant before shining the light, it couldn't build up a resistance. And so they're thinking that this might have to do with the way that the plant can build up immunity or be able to respond to potential insults to its health. He goes on to say, so this plant has a specific memory for the light, which builds its immunity against pathogens, and it can adjust to varying light conditions. Every day or week of the season has a characteristic light quality. So the plants perform a sort of biological light computation using information contained in the light to immunize themselves against diseases that are prevalent during that specific season.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty wicked cool.
Yeah, I mean, first, okay, interesting that plants have a signaling pathway to indicate, light intensity and quality. Fascinating. But the fact that they can actually make changes to their physiology, to their metabolism, increase amounts of pathogen-resistant compounds or whatever, that's just that they're planning, that there's some kind of like, oh, the light it's fall, we got to worry about this beetle thingy,
It's crazy.
You don't expect it, right, Allie?
Did they say what the chemical pathway is that signals for light intensity at all? Did they find that out?
Yeah, they actually within one leaf cell, they actually saw a cascade of events that were light induced and took place and signaled to the rest of the plant. And a specific cell that was important to this signaling is called the bundle sheath cell. So in this article, they didn't go into the details of the actual chemical pathway and the signaling cascade, but I'm sure that's something that they're working out and they're figuring it out.
Huh.
Yeah.
I wonder if they could use that to help. I don't know, like artificially help plants resist disease or something somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Or if you knew either through chemical intervention, or if you knew how plants would respond to particular kinds of light and you wanted them to be a particular way, maybe you could, give them, put a certain kind of light on them during certain times of the year. Yeah. Interesting idea. Yeah. But I'm not lying, Allie. Can you tell? I'm not lying.
I can't tell, but maybe if you had this new lie detector test that it uses your eyes to test if you're lying or not, rather than the traditional polygraph test. These psychologists, John Keecher and Doug Hacker and Ann Cook and Dan Woltz and David Raskin, are all developing this eye tracking technology that is promising to be an alternative to the traditional polygraph test. Sanders, one of the researchers, says, the eye tracking method for detecting lies has great potential. It's a matter of national security that our government agencies have the best and most advanced methods for detecting truth from fiction, and we believe that we are addressing that need by licensing the extraordinary research done at the University of Utah. So they're doing this research at the University of Utah, and they're developing a method of tracking your eyes and trying to test whether or not you're lying. And they said that they've determined that lying requires more work than telling the truth. So they look for indications which would indicate that you're lying, such as dilated pupils, or you could take longer to read and answer the questions. And they can do all this by measuring your eye movement and your pupil dilation. And these are often really, really small reactions, and so they require very sophisticated measurement and statistical modeling to determine the significance of each one. We've gotten great results from our experiments, says one of the researchers. They are as good as or better than the polygraph, and we are still in the early stages of this innovative new method to determine if someone is trying to deceive you. And they like this method because it costs less and it requires only 1/5 of the time, which is currently needed for examinations. And this research began 5 years ago, I guess, when they started discussing the concept, but it's developed into a pretty workable method. And another researcher, Cook, says it's exciting that our testing method is going to be taken from a basic research program to commercial use. So they're hoping to actually get it used in the Department of Homeland Security and stuff like that.
Right. Well, I would love it. I would love for it to be used by the general public.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could use that against our government.
What I'd love to do is go back and review videos of politicians giving speeches, or have it analyze eye movement in videos, or I don't know. You could do all sorts of things like that.
There's actually a television show that is based on
Lie to
this.
Me. Yeah,
Lie to Me, and then one of them he's using the example of sort of dissecting Nixon giving one of the speeches. I'm not a crook, and
yes you are.
like you can tell by this eye movement and this nostril twitch here, and And then he has some kid comes up onto the stage, and he's going to show the whole classroom how it works. And the kid, he gets it wrong every time with this kid. And then walking away is like, we got to find it. He's a psychopath. He's probably a serial killer. There's no, that's the only way he could have beaten my test. And of course, because it's TV, the kid is a serial killer, and they catch him. And
it's taken a little. The
Oh.
micro expression stuff is taken a little bit to the extreme in that program, but the research is going somewhere. There are these.
It is, and we actually touched on this a little bit in previous shows about how there's a lot of our physical actions that are related to what we're saying. Like if we're talking about something that's in the future, we tend to lean forward. If we're remembering something in the past, we tend to move backwards.
Usually, if you're thinking about something, your eyes move up and to the right. Like if you're thinking about of how you're going to answer something or what you're going to say.
And
usually
it depends
eyes
on
go
what
up
it is,
and to the right.
Because there was also that study that did it was basically with cards, whether you had a higher or lower card than the card. You could see your card and you could see the instructor's card, and then they would ask, by watching your eye movements, they could tell if you had a higher or lower number. Because if you had a higher card than that one, you would look up and to the right, and if you had a lower card, you'd look down and to the left. And there's some similarities between that and when we're telling a lie. If you ever, some of this has been around and studied for literally decades to the nth degree. And what
we still don't know that much about it.
Not scientifically, but if you pick up any video on poker tells, it's amazing the depths to which they go in analyzing the smallest little quirk of a facial tic, anything like that. When somebody tells a lie, they can present the lie perfectly normal, but at a certain point of time that becomes hard to carry that in the mind, and you think you've pulled it off, so there's a release. So the eyes that are like quite certain at one point, when they think the focus is off, there'll be a little like relief, like a little exhale, like whew, just got away with that one. It's real subtle, it's not that big, but these are things that the whole lie detectors tests in the past were even developed on. While you're telling the lie, you may actually still be stable, but after that question's over, that's when you would see the spike of the blood pressure or something.
I bet they're going to make an iPhone app for this.
That would be awesome. Or that new little one where you can do the video conversation back and forth and just have a little BS meter on the side.
You can practice lying.
Yeah, with the new front-facing camera, I'm sure you can just look at it and practice lying. Exactly, Allie.
Yeah, I'm sure people would get better at it then too.
I have a tip that shouldn't go out. This is not for the general public. We don't want the terrorists to have this information or the criminals. But if you're a listener of this show, I think it's important that at some point you may want to or have to beat a lie detector test. Here's how you do it.
We only have about 10 minutes left in the show and a lot of stuff to get through. Okay. You have another story still, so.
You clench your toes. They're in your shoes. They can't see them. All the tension from your body, all those things they're looking for, all those little hints, those little clues, will go into the tension of your toes, which they will never see, and you'll just be a straight line all the way through.
All right. Put it in your toes.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me a story. Put it in your toes and tell me a story.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from the brainiacs at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The MIT brains over there have new research that indicates that the interactions of microscopic organisms around a particular organic material may alter the chemical properties of the ocean and ultimately could even influence global climate by affecting cloud formation in the atmosphere.
Love it.
That's rad. So Justin Seymour, no relation, a research fellow at the University of Technology, Sydney, is actually the lead author of the paper that is published in the July 16th issue of Science. And it is describing how a relative of the smelly chemical that seabirds and seals use to locate prey, dimethysulfide.
Dimethyl sulfide, DMS, yes.
May serve a similar purpose at the microbial scale, helping marine microorganisms find food and cycle chemicals that are in turn important to the climate.
Yeah.
So what they found is the ecological interactions and behavioral responses taking place within volumes of a fraction of a drop of seawater can ultimately influence important ocean chemical cycling processes, says Seymour. The team of researchers led by Professor Roman Stocker of MIT, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, recorded microbes swimming toward the chemical dimethyl sulfide
DMS.
Proportionate. DMSP. Propionate. Yeah, DMSP, as it was released into a tiny channel occupied by the microbe. So They said the thing was about the size of a thumb drive and had a little tiny tube in there for the chemical, and as they inserted it, they could watch the microorganisms as they all moved towards it.
I love it.
The fact that the microbes actively move towards the DMSP indicates that the tiny organisms play a role in ocean sulfur and carbon cycles, which exert then, in turn, the powerful influence on the Earth's climate. So how fast they consume DMSP rather than converting it into DMS is important because DMS is in itself used later in the formation of clouds in the atmosphere. So
Yeah. After. Yeah, and this has been shown before, the iron seeding experiments, where they want to seed the oceans with iron to potentially lead to more organic material going down to the bottom of the ocean. The idea behind that is they seed with iron. There are nutrients that come in with the iron, and there are organisms, little microorganisms that swim there to where the iron's released. They release a bunch of DMS, and you can get like huge cloud cover over these spots where the iron and plankton areas are, and then the little plankton go away. Carbon sequestration. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is interesting too because once you get the effect of the moisture going back up into the atmosphere, more of this chemical means more cloud formation can take place, and if it's being being created by the microbes doing this, then it changed that the microbes themselves then ultimately are dictating how much cloud formation can take place. This is also interesting. Researchers found that some of the marine microbes, including bacteria, are attracted to DMSP because they actually feed on it, whereas others are attracted to the chemical because it signals the presence of the prey that would be feeding on it. So it challenges. There were previous theories that this chemical was actually a deterrent against predators. Looks like it actually is attracting them. It's also interesting because this is the same way, like we were talking, like it was in here earlier, that seals and some birds are actually using this.
Yeah.
Using this as so from the microbial level all the way up to this macro mammal scale. We're not all that different. We're still using the same signals to find food.
Yep. I love it. We're going to jump into the Minion mailbag now. I had a letter from Jeff Biziadecki. I probably got your last name completely wrong, but Jeff says, "Greetings, Dr. Kiki and Justin. I'm wondering if this article," and he gives a link to an article at unhelium.com called "How the BP Gulf Disaster May Have Triggered a World-Killing Event," is truly cause for concern, or if it is being blown out of proportion. While the methane is certainly an issue, can it really be this bad and cause this sort of catastrophe? It's difficult discerning what is hype and what is real science on the internet, which is why I turn to you, trusted Twis leaders. Thank you for your time, faithful Twis Minion, Jeff. So I just want to read the beginning of this article just to give you, the gist of the article is that by drilling under the sea in the Gulf, BP may have triggered a massive release of methane that will bubble up and suffocate all life on Earth and just kill everything. And while there is precedent, like some lakes in Africa that have these bubbles that usually that can form on the bottom of lakes if they're in a volcanic region, an area where there is activity that could release something into the bottom of the lake, and then something triggers a turnover of the water. So pressure changes, there's a temperature change that leads to a sudden shift in the water. The balance can be flipped, and that bubble can be released into the atmosphere over the lake. And if there's anybody nearby, they will probably suffocate because it's all methane and not very breathable.
It also changes the ability of anything that's floating above that to maintain buoyancy. So if you're a ship cruising over one of these bubble clouds that's coming up, the density of the water changes and the boat can just drop like a rock to the bottom. That's partly what they think takes place in the Bermuda Triangle, why so many things go missing. So many ships just kind of seem to disappear. it's possible that there's methane releases taking place.
And there
that.
are methane releases that do take place periodically, and potentially there have been giant methane releases that have taken place millions of years ago, leading to influence mass extinctions. But it would have been a completely different time. There's a lot of circulation in the oceans right now. The Gulf still has a lot of circulation. You read down in this article, it's basically a conspiracy theory article talking about like, oh, BP is not letting the media in, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. They're keeping tabs on it. They have sensors down below. They know how much methane is being released. This is honestly, BP is not triggering a massive methane bubble release that's going to kill us all. And that's all I want to say right now. I may respond to this in more detail on my blog or something like that. But for now, that's all I wanted to say about that. Last letter. Big fan here from Canada, the Great White North, that is actually quite green and a little too warm right now. He. Was just listening to your podcast where Allie was talking about bubbles in the bloodstream to deliver medicine, and I remembered a bit about when I was in the hospital ER and was hooked up to the IV. I started panicking while they were setting about fixing my shoulder. I had dislocated it. When I saw a bubble heading up the IV toward my hand, I didn't say anything right away because I hoped they would notice it before it got to me. I had also heard that bubbles in the bloodstream could stop your heart. When it got into the final lock segment of the IV, the point of no return, I finally piped up, should this bubble be here? The nurse closest to me just smiled and told me that a bubble in the tube approximately 1 to 3 feet long would be approximately 1 to 3 feet long would be required to do any harm. So the micro bubbles shouldn't be too much of an issue, I think. Some people in the chat room sounded a little bit worried. Sounds like a great advance in medicine to me. Thanks a bunch for the three of you putting on this show. I enjoy it thoroughly each week. Ciao from Tom.
They have an Italian town in Canada.
Yeah. So Allie, you got some. You got a good. You scared a few people, but I think we're all right.
All right.
Yeah. On next week's show, we have more science, and in the meantime, read The Weather Makers by Tim Flannery. You can be a part of our Twis book club. You go to twisbookclub.ning.com to take part in any conversations or other things that might be happening in the social side of things, or you can just read it in private if you want to on your own, but that's what we're reading this month. And I'd also like to give some shout outs to Jason Brown, Joel Gustafson, Monkey, Linda Corson, Tony Steele, Sean Highland, and everyone else who wrote in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Twis is available via podcast. You can go to our website, www.twis.org, and maybe you can click on a link that says subscribe to the podcast, if it's there.
It's not there yet.
It's not there yet.
Yeah,
so don't
go to iTunes. Go to iTunes.
Yeah, Google us on the iTunes. You can also Google us on the Droid. We have a Droid app, apparently.
That's right, in the Android Marketplace. If you have a Droid, you can go to the Android Marketplace, Twist for Droid, look for it. You can get us on your phone, on your smartphone. For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes are going to be available on the website, twis.org, twis.org. We want to hear from you, too, so send us an email. It's Kirsten, Kirsten, or Justin, Justin, at thisweekinscience.com.
In the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion, which you can also contact us, though, on the Twitter, right?
Yep.
We got at Dr. Kiki or at Jacksonfly or at Allie_Bob. If there's
Underscore.
an underslash.
Underscore.
That's what it is. I found out it's an underscore.
It's an underslash.
There we go. That's some learning.
Maybe you're right. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, please let us know.
And we will be back here next week, and we really do hope that you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from today's show, remember,
it's all in your head. Choop, choop.